Happy Halloween. You've reached a fright-tacular edition of The Signal Watch. I'm your ghost, Ryan Steens. Most episodes, we discuss movies, television, comics, and more. But for Halloween, we're asking you to join me and my co-ghost, Spooky Simon, for a horrifically fun 5 episodes of Halloween frights. This year, we're talking horror sequels, the movies they made to catch lightning in a bottle one more time, and maybe make some cash along the way. And we'll try to put it all in perspective. Stay terrified. We're gonna try to make this weird. Happy Halloween and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me this spooky day is
Spooky Day himself again. Simon Day, hello. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah, we watched. So we're doing this year.
Sons.
The theme is yes. The theme this year is we're doing sequels to maybe better horror films, but classic horror films. We're doing the sequels to those. So
are we doing good sequels? I thought we were doing sequels that are strangely better than we thought.
That's true for one of these two movies that we're covering today.
This one spoils the run of films we've done so far.
Yeah. So we're doing two. Last year we did Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and we did both Dracula and Horror of Dracula. And we also did the Hammer of Frankenstein, I should mention. So you can go look for those if you want to. This year we're covering Son of Frankenstein and Son of Dracula. These are really the only kind of the Universal initial kind of 20-year run of horror films. These are really the only ones we're doing. Have you seen these before?
I was thinking, these were on BBC Two, I guess in the 80s. Hey, remember the 80s, everybody? And what do you mean no? And when I was probably like about 10, and they used to be on early evening. And I guess I saw a bunch of Wolfmen and Frankensteins. I was thinking watching this, I really prefer the Frankensteins and Wolfmen, probably because I saw more of those. But I think they're just more fun than the Draculas and the Mummies that are a bit slow and staid. And then that also made me think, I guess with the Hammer ones, by contrast, the Draculas and the Frankensteins are probably best because there's so many of them. And you got, Cushing and Lee kind of leading those, however bad they get, they're always good. And of course, there was only one Oliver Reed werewolf movie for Hammer, so that didn't really go anywhere. And the Mummies went downhill pretty fast after the first one. The Universal ones, I think I always, if you say Universal horror to me, I guess straight away, the kind of like, the Homer Simpson image I get in my head is the Wolfmen fighting Frankenstein's monster, I guess. So watching these, I kind of enjoyed both of them. I wasn't blown away by both of them. I mean, we can talk about it in a minute, but I found some bits unintentionally hilarious. But I kind of enjoyed both of them. They definitely weren't a waste of time, but I don't know if I'd necessarily reach for them again particularly quickly.
Yeah. I like one of these much more than I like the other one.
Frankenstein.
Yes.
It's easy.
I actually did write down some notes. Like I haven't taken notes for a podcast in forever. But this time I did. So
we did skip a movie, Dracula's Daughter, and I'll be honest.
You said it was rubbish, didn't you?
I don't know. People consider it to be really good. I consider it to be so slow it's painful. Like it just kind of I can't tell you what that movie's about, because at some point when I'm watching it, my eyes start doing that thing where they're vibrating because I can't. I'm just so bored. I'm just like, what am I looking at?
Well, I think last year the one I had trouble with was actually the original Dracula, which compared to the other stuff we watched, it seemed painfully slow. And I mean, we kind of put that down to the fact that it was the first one and they were still kind of feeling their way. But these ones, especially Son of Frankenstein, by contrast, I think is almost like a greatest hits. It's like let's throw in everything that worked before and turn up to 11, and and that kind of works. But then it's also like you laugh at it now because it is so cliched.
Yeah. The Son of Frankenstein is, people know it because they've all seen Young Frankenstein. Like that is the movie,
plot, isn't it?
It's the exact same movie, except it is and it's not. But that was the thing that totally shocked me the first time I watched Son of Frankenstein was, oh my God, this is what Young Frankenstein is spoofing. Okay, I get it. And I don't know if they've never gotten past Bride, they're going to have a hard time figuring that out. The other funny thing about this is Bela Lugosi never played Dracula again between the 1931 Dracula and then Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yeah. But he was the Frankenstein creature as well in one of them. Mm-hmm. And of course, he's Eagle in a couple of them, I think, at least. Maybe more.
Yeah. And so it's it's hilarious to me that it's like we watched Son of Frankenstein and Son of Dracula, and which one is Lugosi actually in?
He's great, though. He saves the film because, like everybody else, even Karloff, I think, isn't really on their game. And in Karloff's case, I felt a bit sorry for him because I thought like he's like Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween 2. He spends the first half kind of in a coma.
Right.
And then he's basically damaged. So he's not up to full snuff. And he only really lets it loose in the last 10 minutes. But Lugosi's having a great time. He's like gurning. He's hanging out windows. He's playing his bugle.
So Son of Frankenstein is released in 1939. The first one was released in 32. The next one was released in 35. I think I'm getting all these years correct. I didn't write that down. Yeah. This one's it was released in 39. Yeah. And in between 35 and 39, Colin Clive, who'd played Dr. Frankenstein, has passed in real life.
Alcoholism, didn't he?
Yeah. He basically ended up drinking himself to death. So they decide that they're going to jump forward in time. They're saying the other movies took place in like 1892, and this one's a lot more contemporary. And now, so you're meeting Wolf von Frankenstein, played by Basil Rathbone.
Both films are interesting, I think, and probably would have resonated with the audience at the time because both of them are like bang up to date with the settings.
Right.
Which, I think one of the failings of the Hammer films, which, you know how much I love the Hammer films, but one of the failings, which I'm not saying they particularly succeeded in changing in Dracula 1972 AD, but I think one of the failings is all the Hammer films seem very far removed because it's like in the 1800s at some point, and it's like, well, it can't be cool seeing Dracula now,
At the same time, I think it makes it timeless.
Fairy tale like kind of.
Yeah, it's this kind of it does make it so it's less frightening, maybe. But it does say like, I'm watching this, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, and I'm just like, well, it doesn't bother me that, things look a little funky because I know this took place, this story is taking place in 1890 or whatever.
Yeah, I guess maybe with the Hammers, it was just the repetition of it kind of got me down. But
yeah, I just think about things like Dracula 2000, and those things just never aged particularly well. Right.
I mean, I suppose the perfect thing would be have both in a film if you did it well. Have him in different time periods.
Now
dealing with
that you've said it, it's going to happen if it hasn't already.
Badly. Yeah. Well, no, because I was actually more blown away. I know, and we can stick to one film if you want, but I was just going to say I found it kind of more. I guess it hit me harder in Son of Dracula, where Lugosi kind of like, I guess, like stomping around the because he stomps even when he's Dracula. He's a big guy. He looks like a fighter. He looks like a boxer in a cape.
Oh, you mean you said Lugosi? You meant Lon Chaney?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Lon Chaney Jr.
Okay, yeah,
sorry. Yeah. But like just having him in like, I guess the South, because everybody's got black servants.
Yeah.
And swamps and stuff and bayous. And it's just like having him there is kind of interesting. I don't know if it quite works, but it's interesting.
So, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the people who are kind of behind these movies. I think it maybe informs it a little bit.
Yeah.
Son of Dracula was written by Curtis Siodmak.
The Wolfman.
And it stars and he is probably less famous than his brother who directs this movie, Robert Siodmak, who directed The Killers, Crisscross, Phantom Lady, a few other Spiral Staircase, a few other noir films that I quite like. And this movie feels very much like him doing his brother a favor.
But it's also, apparently they had a sibling rivalry and he sacked his brother off the script and replaced him. God. So, yeah. And his brother has a quote that says something like, "My brother was great at characterization and atmosphere and psychology, but he couldn't bloody write." So I don't think there was much love lost between them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were... I'm sure there's tons of story there. This movie also comes out in the middle of World War II. Yeah, it comes out in 1943, so it does take place, I think, in Louisiana, and it's supposed to be this kind of Southern Gothic, the plantation house out in the middle of the swamps.
Yeah,
and I mean, they keep talking about how vital and young America is, and that's what this old world character who's coming in, like an invader from Europe, is coming to take our lifeblood.
Yeah, and literally they kind of say that. They say he's like a plague. He's going to kind of like destroy the land and, make it all dusty and barren and drain everything. Yeah.
This one, in addition to Lon Chaney Jr., also has Evelyn Ankers, who was the romantic interest in The Wolfman.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I was, to be honest, watching this, I was a bit disappointed because after all your talk over the last few years about the size of his moustache, it was a bit of a letdown when I actually saw it. I was expecting something much bigger.
No, I was just distracted by Lon Chaney Jr. having a mustache in general.
I would love it if the false bat on the wires had a mustache when he kept changing to a bat. That'd be great.
There's heavy use of the bat, of the fake bat in this. They have the flying bat and they have the crawling bat. The co-stars in this are Louise Alberton plays Catherine, who Dracula has met over in Europe. And we need to talk about whether he's Dracula or not, because the movie never says who he actually is.
I think he's Alucard, who's a totally different count. I haven't used a mirror on his name.
They do this very strange thing in the movie where they say he's probably, the story of Dracula as we know it is probably true. He was probably killed in Europe in the 1890s. And then they say, so he's probably a descendant, but then he keeps saying, "Well, I'm Dracula." And
he still would be Dracula, though, wouldn't he? Even if he was like a descendant.
Sure, but they never say that he actually is. Yeah,
I like to think
speculating.
I like to think, having watched it, and not wanting to sully my Dracula, my mind, that he is some guy who Dracula bit, some passing boxer from America, the Dracula bit, and then disintegrated, And then, yeah, he picked up the cape and ring and off he goes.
So if you've not seen this movie, Lon Chaney Jr. is bad. I mean, he's supposedly from Budapest, and he has no accent.
Best, though. I think he was trying his best.
Well, yeah.
It's quite low. It's a low bar.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's taking the role seriously. I just think he's completely miscast. I mean,
yeah,
he's got nothing that Lugosi's got. There's absolutely no charm. They clearly cut his lines to the absolute bare minimum.
Yeah.
He says maybe 5 things through the whole movie.
Yeah.
Which, the original Dracula's verbose.
It's not always his fault as well, because, like, I think unintentionally, like, at the end, there's 2 bits that really stood out to me. They were very Dracula-like, which is where he goes for a marriage license.
That was amazing. Seeing Dracula pull over at midnight at a roadside justice of the peace to go get married was, oh man.
And then at the end is spoilers, obviously, like anybody cares. But when the hero Frank sets fire to his coffin, Dracula kind of panics, really. And he's like, put it out. And he's like, and he starts, and I was like, he's sweating. You can see he's sweating. Should a dead person be sweating? I don't think so.
I think that was just the booze coming out of Chaney at that point.
So stuff like that kind of took me a bit out of it, I have to say.
Yeah. I mean, he was when you talk about wartime movies, you have a huge problem in that.
Well, we're not talking about Tom Cruise, so people gave Tom Cruise a bunch of shit when he did Interview for a Vampire, because they were like, it should be Alan Rickman or Jeremy Irons. And once we saw it, we went, actually, he did a really good job. It's more like, yeah, this isn't really working.
Yeah. I mean, you're in the middle of wartime. It's really hard to get male actors. So when you watch movies from 42 to about 46, a lot of the movies are focused on the female characters. And then there's a lot of old guys around them who were, didn't qualify for service. And so they wrote scripts around that. They did movies around that. And then the young males who are around, you never see again, basically after World War II. There's a few of them you do. Like Zach Scott, I think, couldn't serve because of some sort of health issue. But this movie, one of the main characters is the same guy who played George Bailey's dad in It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah, the judge who's running around. I kept going, man, that guy looks familiar. And finally I looked it up and I was like, well, that would be why.
We also have the cut price Van Helsing, Professor Laszlo, who he's like, I'm foreign too, but I'm good foreign. I'm
a collaborator.
So you have a vampire problem. Let me help you with it. Yeah. But, I quite like those 2 old guys. It's kind of weird because I kind of like them on some level, those 2 old guys teaming up.
Mm-hmm.
The American guy and, Professor Laszlo. But then on the other hand, I kind of was rooting for Lon Chaney Jr. because I'm like, all these Americans are very nosy and puritanical and controlling. And just let the dude do what he wants to do,
Yeah, I have written down as a note, the guy who plays Frank, who is the love interest, is played by someone named Robert Page. And I have described him as a dollar store John Payne. He looks vaguely like John Payne if you squint, but he has none of his charisma or charm. And they focus on him so much, and they keep showing him running through their woods.
And
he runs badly because he has to pace with how fast the camera can go. So he's doing the weird movie run where he's really loping. But yeah, it's a crazy movie. The setup is that before the movie's action ever starts, Louise has returned from Europe in the manner of the best,
Kay, isn't it? Kay?
Yeah. Louise is the actress. Catherine has returned from Europe in the manner of classic. I'm a foreign exchange student coming back to the States. Now I believe in mysticism because I spent a summer abroad, sort of thing. She even has her hair up to look. It's in the shape of a bat.
She kind of looks like the Bride of Dracula, even at the start.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, when you first see her, I thought she was a vampire, but you know.
Oh yeah, that's all. Yeah. I mean, they were definitely setting her up so they wouldn't have to change her hair and makeup throughout the shoot. But yeah, I mean, it's so Dracula basically shows up and he is going to insert himself into her life. She has talked her dad into all I want is the house. Everything else can go to my sister Claire, played by Evelyn Ankers. And so Dracula, of course, has no material needs, and so he shows up, and then he talks. You know, they go off to go get married, and she's claimed
doesn't have any material needs because all his cases are empty.
Right, he just needs cases of dirt. But yeah, then Kay turns around. Kay is short for Catherine in this movie. It's my grandmother's same thing, so I don't think about it a whole lot, but I thought maybe I should explain it. But Kay turns around to her boyfriend Frank and says like, "Oh, I'm going to turn you into a vampire, and then we're going to get Dracula." So I never was sure if she was being serious or not, or what.
I think she was, but it's kind of like a terrible plan. Because I mean, how does she know she's going to be able to like have free thoughts once she's vampirized or anything, you know? And also, like he's like, I don't really want that, you know. I don't want to be like, you know, emotional. That's horrible. So also, you know, I feel like with all the kind of American guys, the old guys, like, you know, I'm sure they'd have a field day these days with like all these old middle-aged white guys basically trying to suppress this woman with their own ideas. But it's like, but yeah, I did really like the ending because, you know, I think it would have been so easy to have, you know, the curse is broken and her waking up and her and Frank going off into the sunset. And instead, he just burns her. And I was like, yeah,
it's
like
kind of crazy. Yeah. you get to see Dracula's like coffin get completely torched, and then you see Dracula then in the sun, basically
rubbish disintegration.
Right, but it does kind of foretell what they're going to try and do with the hammer disintegration.
It seems interesting. Sorry to interrupt. It seems interesting that both these films finish with the monster falling in a puddle as well.
I hadn't thought of that. You know, and I half wonder if they didn't do it because if you don't see them actually die, then there's the chance you can always bring them back, which of course they did over and over and over.
Very true.
Because by that point they realized they were going to have to come back. But yeah, Lugosi, Channing is just such like a big sausage in this. Like he's such a weird choice. You spend very long scenes with these old guys kind of standing around talking that at one point in the movie, I'll be honest, I got up and started doing the dishes when two of the old guys were talking to each other because I was like, it doesn't matter what they're saying here. They're just filling time so this movie can be long enough to be a feature film at this point.
I'm laughing so much because so did I. I literally got up and started doing other stuff. And then I kind of came back when I think Dracula came back on screen.
Yep. Same.
There was two cool bits though. Two bits I was kind of impressed by. When Frank shot at Dracula and it went through him and killed Kay, that was good. And I really liked how Dracula hid his coffin underwater in the swamp. Which, if only he'd have carried on doing that, I don't know why he moved it to like a very easy to destroy place instead. But I thought that was quite cool how it kind of like came up and then he came out of it in kind of vapor. That was excellent. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, the movie had for the time. To me, one of the cooler bat to vampire effects is I can't remember. Mark of the Vampire might be the name of the movie. This kind of follows on that, where you do see like they use some hand drawn animation to kind of turn the bat into like a black spot, and then it spreads out into Dracula into Lon Chaney Jr. And they do that a couple times. They do a few things with the smoke coming from under doors and whatnot. And I think it's pretty effective for the era, especially for in the middle of wartime.
It actually reminded me of Bram Stoker's Dracula, like years later. That's the only other time I really remember them using Dracula can turn into a mist so much, which was in the book, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it the script is nowhere to me as good or as like, there's some real horror and almost like the poetry of, like some of the stuff in the 31 Dracula of Dwight Fry giving like these little speeches about like, there's just rats everywhere. And,
I've forgotten about Dwight Fry. He's so good. I want to see a face-off between him and Lugosi as Igor.
But yeah, so to me, I mean, these movies kind of get worse as you go from kind of movie to movie with occasional, new highlights. But yeah, the Dracula movies, I've watched all of them in the set that I got from Universal, but they're not movies that I reach for that often. I pretty much out of that set, I reach for Dracula. And there aren't that many Dracula movies. People tend to always want to return to some version of the original Dracula story when they retell Dracula. It's hard, I think, to do the sequels.
Also, even Hammer, I think, had problems with Dracula because they never knew what to do with him and Christopher Lee in a movie. So you kind of have these different plots built around Dracula. But like Christopher Lee said, he just gets resurrected, hisses a bit, kills some people, and gets destroyed. Yeah. And that's pretty much what happens every film.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's kind of like Godzilla. You end up making the movies a lot more about the people kind of around the character, I think, than you end up making them about actually what's going on with Dracula.
Yeah.
And then of course you end up with something like Van Helsing where they do worry about what Dracula's, schemes are. And you're like, oh, Jesus, I don't care. Yeah. It's not any better. So.
Well, I was thinking both these films, I guess if we're going to say Lon Chaney Jr. is the son of Dracula, are kind of about the sins of the father being revisited or basically copying the father, reenacting what they did before. A bit like other films like Hands of the Ripper or The Fly 2. So yeah, and I think that's a lot more obvious there in Son of Frankenstein.
Yeah, Son of Frankenstein to me is, as you said, it's this kind of like weirdly uneven movie. It's got Basil Rathbone, as we mentioned, and Boris Karloff, and Inspector Crow is played by Lionel Atwill.
Pretty good.
But the director on this is a guy named Roland V. Lee, and I if I found out he didn't actually direct this and somebody else did, I wouldn't be that shocked.
Yeah.
Because you look at his filmography and you're like, most of this is garbage. It doesn't really make sense in 39 for them to have handed this thing off. Willis Cooper, who wrote it, similarly doesn't really have a ton of other credits. George Robinson, who is the cinematographer, does have some more impressive credits, but it's go ahead.
You can feel the difference between this and James Whale, because James Whale, I was thinking today earlier, and forgive me if this is like a terrible kind of like idea on my part, but I feel like James Whale, if you take James Whale and he's like Tim Burton, he made Frankenstein and he kind of did it as the studio wanted it. Then they let him loose and he made Bride of Frankenstein, and the studio went, what have you done? And so the studio went, let's get Joel Schumacher to get it back on track and just make a nice, Batman Frankenstein film that everybody can watch. And I feel like that's kind of what happened with this series as well,
That may have been what happened. I don't know how much Whale wanted to do the sequel to begin with. I can see him dipping back for thirds and going, no, we've told all the story that you can possibly tell.
Yeah.
The funny thing is there's some stuff they do accidentally in this movie that does set them up so they can make more Frankenstein films. Like they go, oh, it's not just that he made a man, it's that he made a Superman who cannot die. Like you never heard that
Superman.
before in any of these. And they're
And that went
talking
a bit
about
too.
like, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say that's where it tipped over a little bit for me, because when he started calling him a superhuman and going, look at his blood, I was like, this is a bit like when Star Wars goes, it's not about mindset and training, it's whether you've got the midichlorians.
Right.
You've gone from like hard to believe to like completely fantastical now.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it's a reflection of, science making its way into people's homes via, radio shows and magazines, where maybe it was still a little too early in 32, and certainly not something Whale cared about.
No.
And
Cosmic rays, apparently.
And people do feel like they need to start explaining things after a while, whether anyone asked for it or not. I mean, that's just how you end up with like endless series of books and movies like that. This one, I think,
a lot of exposition in this one. There was some in Dracula, but there's a lot in Son of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Like Basil Rathbone, every time he gets a chance to sit down, he reels off like 5 minutes worth.
Right. And he's this is really the first time I realized like he's playing someone who goes from being super chill and relaxed, like my dad was this guy who made some mistakes, I don't really know about it, he died when I was young, I'm returning to this castle, and then he goes crazy manic. And it's so much of what Gene Wilder was trying to channel in Young Frankenstein. So much of this movie is the same sort of like, clearly he watched it and went, this is hilarious. Like Rathbone is like shouting at people for absolutely no reason for the last third of the movie. Like,
it's great when he does as well, because I feel like the first half, his character is, I don't know, a little bit borderline annoying. But then when he started, I think when the inspector comes and like arrests him, from then on to the end, it's brilliant. Because like I was laughing out loud at some of the lines he comes out with, because he goes like, well, what's happened to Benson? And he goes, maybe he just wanted to go out and get drunk. Yeah. And then and then later on, like the inspector goes, so you met Igor? What happened to Igor? He goes, yeah, I shot him. What are you going to do about it? And I know, this is brilliant.
Yeah, I've never seen I've seen Rathbone now in probably 20 or 30 movies, because he's a kind of a huge supporting actor, really. He always turns up as like, the bad guy in Zorro or certainly Robin Hood or things like that, and a couple other Errol Flynn movies. And I love the guy. Like I get so excited when he pops up in the credits, but this is really the big leading man thing I've seen him in.
What about was he Sherlock Holmes? Am I mixing that up?
Yeah, no, he was in a movie or two, but it's been forever since I've seen those.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's luckily he's matched in energy kind of by the inspector who's doing this like kind of, which what Kenneth Mars is doing is just this exactly. Like he doesn't change it at all, more or less, for Young Frankenstein.
Well, the arm, even from the start, the arm is so, before Strangelove, kind of like, so overly done, It's almost like they that's sweet James Whale in a way. The fact that they just keep doing it. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, and he's great. He has some great scenes with the little kid. Little kid who's English with a Texan accent.
So yeah, that kid, I looked it up because Jamie said, why does this kid sound like a Southern belle while we were watching the movie? And I was like, well, I looked up, he's from San Antonio.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
He won some like cute kid competition. So he ended up in movies for a bit.
I mean, I like the stuff later on with him where Karloff, because Karloff, I feel like really does get the short end of the stick in this. And I feel like I like the stuff he does with the kid at the end where he thinks about killing him, but then the kid holds his hand and he's like, whoa, and that's kind of great, but there's just not enough of it. I mean, I think the only person who really comes out of this well is Lugosi.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy Rathbone, and it's a completely unhinged part, but it does. I don't know how well it actually plays well now, other than me kind of getting giddy watching him.
I mean, he's great, like I say, for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think, Lionel Atwell's kind of great, but it's, I just feel like compared to the first two movies, Karloff really, at best, is repeating himself, and at worst doesn't have anything to do.
Well, and after this, he didn't come back, right? I mean,
plus, is it me or is he like a lot shorter in this? Because I'm like, Basil Rathbone's the same height as the creature. I'm like, that can't be right.
Well, so Karloff was never all that tall. Everybody else around him was short, and then they put him on like 4-inch lifts, and it's like, well, Rathbone's like 6'3", so what are you going to do? That's how tall he actually is. And so when the kids are like, I saw a giant, I'm like, did you? Because he's the same size as your dad.
To you, maybe. He's a very short man in the heels.
Well, it's similar to when people talk about Bride. There's this like story that Elsa Lanchester was 7 feet tall and because she was wearing stilts. And I'm like,
the hair. Yeah.
We watch the film and it's like, well, no, she's exactly the same height with the hair as oh God, now his name's escaped me, but not Colin Clive, but the other mad scientist who's in it.
Oh, Pretorius.
Yeah, Pretorius. What kind of name is Pretorius? And so she's clearly not actually 7 feet tall. So I don't even know where that myth has ever even come from. But
that does remind me of a nice scene in the script that they didn't film, which would have been kind of great for nerds like you and me, but I can see why they didn't bother. Where Basil Rathbone goes to his father's tomb for the first time, and there would have also been the remains of Pretorius and the Bride of Frankenstein in there. I don't know whether skeletons or whatever, but I'm like, that would have been a nice nod to the previous film, actually.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd explain whose bones were whose, but yeah.
Still got the hair, the massive hair on the skeletons.
Well, it's funny because I thought about a little bit about this movie sets up a trapdoor for the bride to have escaped. Because they say, oh, well, he's not dead after we dropped a castle on him because he's actually immortal. That's what your dad built. And I'm like, well, the bride is the exact same thing, created through the exact same procedure, and she ain't nowhere around. I don't see her like sitting on a table anywhere. So they just never talk about her at all. So, I mean, there is a book out there you can find that's about the bride who apparently like legs it after the castle blows up and goes and like lives as like this globe-trotting life or something. But I mean, she looked fairly human, right? So just get some good conditioner and she should be fine.
It's a lot better than he did, which is why she didn't want to go out with him, I think. But they also keep saying it's alive. I'm like, talk about milking that line, Colin Clive's line. It's like,
well, they do something with the lighting.
Toast in the morning. They should have had toast in the morning. And when the toast comes up, it's alive. The toast is alive.
They do something in this movie that, like Dracula, you can tell this one was kind of trying to me a little bit harder. Like, there's a lot of like German expressionism through this whole movie. I think they did it partially to be
case ever.
Oh man, built. Yeah, it's so treacherous.
The only person more insane than Frankenstein is his architect. That's it.
And that dining room, man, with two like gigantic 10-foot fireplaces, like it'd be nice and toasty in there. But they do, they leaned into the design on this thing when they weren't just reusing Universal's German, sets for the backlot. But they also ended up reusing some actors in this. So basically, Igor is pissed because 8 guys knew that he'd been stealing bodies for the dad, and so they tried to hang him. His neck broke. They thought he was dead. They just threw him in the castle, but he wasn't dead, comes back to life, and now he's getting revenge by having the monster kill the guys.
Yeah. But then during Warner, after about 4 of those or 5 of those, the monster got hit by lightning and kind of went on the blink a bit. So he's had him kind of just lying down since then.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what thought about him being on the blink, but that's absolutely right. So Michael Mark had been Ludwig in the first movie. He'd been the father of little Maria, and he pops up as one of those guys playing a different character. And Lionel Belmore played the Burgomaster in the first movie, and he pops up as one of those guys as well. And they both get popped off by the monster during the course of this movie, off screen, but it happens.
I feel like the monster itself is a lot more brutal in this one, a lot more of a monster, whereas in the first two, you kind of felt like any deaths it caused were accidental. Whereas in this, it's purposely going around killing people quite happily, quite cheerfully.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were trying to. I noticed that, like, when he first comes across Basil Rathbone, he thinks about choking him out, and it's like, well, that's. I mean, maybe by the time he's been persecuted that much, that's just how he is with people when he comes across them. But
yeah,
at the very end, he seems genuinely sad when he realizes that Igor is dead, and
yeah, that's a great moment.
Yeah, and that's when you can kind of see kind of the Karloff monster from the prior movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he doesn't really get a whole lot to do with any of that. But yeah, I mean, he thought, oh, I finally have a friend. Someone's finally, oh, he wants me to kill people. Sure, I have no moral compass. You know, I'm just this thing ambling around. So.
Yeah, I enjoyed this definitely more than Son of Dracula. There's just a lot more going on, a lot more kind of colorful characters, I think.
Yeah, and there's some stuff in the cinematography they do that I like. Like occasionally they get kind of the light just right, and Rathbone has nice dark eyes, and you can see a spark in there when he starts kind of going like, wait, I think I could bring him back. And they kind of do this nice white dancing light in his eye. There's kind of the famous in Young Frankenstein scene where they're throwing darts. And one of the things in this is Rathbone is throwing darts and hitting the center and not looking at the board. Like they couldn't fake that. He did that. So clearly it was a trick he'd shown off around, and they're like, oh, let's have him throw darts in this. At the very end, they let him just go. Like,
yeah, the end is amazingly abrupt. Actually, it's like I'm like, oh, whoa, we're out of here, are we? Because it's like the monster basically he pushes him in the pit, in a bit of a swashbuckling mode, and yeah, it's a shame. Shame Karloff didn't do the Terminator 2 thumbs up as he went down there, but basically then suddenly it's like, we're at the train station. Anyway, everybody, you can have my castle. See ya. Credits. You're like, okay.
He is indirectly responsible for killing several people in the course of like 3 weeks, including his own butler.
They love him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like, well, okay, that's pretty. I guess that's okay. But then again, how many films have we seen where, like, Liam Neeson wipes out Belgium, and then he kind of comes back on a plane to see his daughter at the end?
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of questions about that. We've ended the movie and now we're done. We need to just be done. So
please don't mind, because they're all criminals.
Yeah, these were like the town leaders. It would be like wiping out the city council, and it's like, oh, well, you're going to leave town. That's fine as long as you don't come back. Like it's. They've also
got the 8 aldermen, and I'm like, how big is this town? Because I've only seen 5 other people, like a guy with a goat, Yeah,
this movie doesn't have a lot of the of course the 2 prior movies have lots of pitchfork and stake sort of scenes, and this is a lot more limited in kind of the size. I imagine, and I like I said, I think the budget may have impacted their decision to do the expressionism. And at this point, they weren't quite sure, I'm sure, what the returns were going to be, even though it was Karloff coming in and bringing in Lugosi and all of that. But
there's one
parts
really
of it
cool
look really.
Where they're storming the castle and they kind of come out of a fog. And I'm sure, like you say, the fog's there to hide how few of them there are.
Yeah.
But it actually looks pretty cool. And then I think there's like a close shot of a bunch of them, like, surrounding the place. But that's about it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not kind of the endless shots of villagers running through the streets of Frankenstein Village or any of that in this one. But yeah, I enjoy it. I think it's nowhere near as smart as the first two movies. And, if you listen to the podcast last year, Bride of Frankenstein is full stop one of my favorite movies, as is Frankenstein.
Oh yeah.
And I just, this is a different director, a different writer, probably a lower budget, maybe different producers behind the whole thing. It does kind of set you up so you can get immediately into the next Frankenstein sequels, but then you start getting into Bela Lugosi as the monster and Glenn Strange, and they just kind of go downhill from there.
Well, it's weirdly a kind of cheapening of the premise, but then it also kind of makes it more fun a little bit, because it's kind of like almost like anything goes, and we're gonna like I say, the script I thought was like hilarious towards the end. Basil Rathbone's going on about, and this is quite early on, but Basil Rathbone's going on about the castle, and his wife's like, "Yes, dear, you do choose the strangest places," and it's just like little throwaways, things like that, or the parboiling, like, "You should come back, Inspector. I'll parboil you," and all this kind of stuff, So you can totally see that this is teetering on spoof. So how easy it was for Mel Brooks, and he said Mel Gibson, Mel Brooks to turn this into a total spoof, because it's almost there itself,
Yeah. I can totally see them like sitting around having drinks, watching this in a screening room and going,
yeah.
It wouldn't take much.
But I thoroughly, I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed both of them, don't get me wrong, but I think this was, and to be honest, I probably saw this when I was younger, so maybe this resonates more. But yeah, Son of Frankenstein, I think, definitely wins out of the two of them. And it is still early enough in the franchise that it hasn't quite slid into the like Monster Mash. Things are starting to look very cheap, and whose turn is it? Everybody swapping apart. Lon Chaney. Who's Lon Chaney playing now? They're all kind of swapping monsters.
I mean, if nothing else, if you've never really looked into the Universal movies very much, that is a bizarre and interesting aspect of all of that. And they do kind of have these actors who also pop up from film to film, like Evelyn Ankers. And I can only imagine what it was like being in kind of the horror section of Universal back in that era, kind of going, "Oh, we're doing another Wolfman picture. Okay, I'll be there," and
he wants to be the Wolfman. The person who puts their hands up first gets it.
I mean, just, really, really wild. As they kind of exploited those, then there was kind of the lull, and then it came back a little bit with the Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Abbott and Costello. And that's kind of the interesting thing, right? These things literally end with Abbott and Costello movies.
Yeah.
I totally forgot to write it up, but I just watched Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy for the first time. And I mean, it's bizarre to see something. It'd be like if at this point, I mean, the Marvel movies have definitely skewed more comedic since Guardians of the Galaxy and whatnot, but it'd be like if at this point we were doing straight up like Will Ferrell's going to be in the next, Guardians movie or Iron Man movie or whatever.
Yeah.
And you expected it was going to be for 10-year-olds, which is really what those movies were.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's interesting that both of these films kind of were made because they'd re-released the original Dracula and Frankenstein as a double bill, and it had done massive business. So it's like the new higher ups at Universal were like, "Hey, we're not really doing horror anymore. We're doing high quality product." And the audience went, "No, we want more horror." And they went, "Okay, then we'll make a bunch of sequels."
Yeah, and it's and I know we lamented this a bit last year, but with Universal keeps kind of struggling to figure out how they're going to do these movies, and the Tom Cruise Mummy The Invisible Man that they kind of took a stab at, and it's like, I honestly have not watched that movie because it came out just as COVID hit.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have not been in the right headspace to sit down and watch a movie about a woman being abused for 90 minutes, whether it's, a horror movie or not.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, is that the right way to go? We're all kind of cheering that direction for a minute there. And now I'm like, but is it? So I don't really know how,
The Wolfman with, Benicio del Toro a few years ago as well, and see your big eye roll there. But yeah, like you say, they keep trying to restart this stuff, and I feel like they're not sure whether to modernize it or do very period pieces that are very like almost like spot on remakes. They probably need fresh minds, I think.
Yeah, I don't mind a modern telling of any of these things. But I think what they need to do is kind of say, okay, what made the original work? Not let's turn this into Tom Cruise karate kicking, mummies. Think about like, it's horror. Like you can do that and you can make it so it's still PG-13 by just not showing a few things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could still cast Tom Cruise, but he needs to be afraid the mummy is going to kill him, and he's not going to just like shoot it or whatever. So
I want to see Tom Cruise as Igor.
The thing is, Tom Cruise would probably kill it. Like if you put him in a wig and like put the fake neck on him, he'd be like, man, why is he messing around with this Mission Impossible garbage? He should be doing this.
Tom Cruise is Igor. I'll buy that for $1.
Hey man, I mean, Tropic Thunder. If you would have told me he was going to nail that.
Yeah. So, no, you're right. Yeah, we could have something. Yeah, well, like I say, I enjoyed that. I always enjoy the fact that you make me watch films I wouldn't necessarily watch or dig out.
And likewise.
And definitely check these out. If you get a chance over Halloween, you can do a lot worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these are good. Like if you're trying to put on something to like, just have for atmosphere too. And like totally kid safe, like zero blood, a little bit of freakiness here and there. But no kid's going to be afraid of Lon Chaney Jr. lumbering around in a cave. So you're safe. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back soon. We're going to have this is our penultimate episode. We're going to have our final episode next week, just in time for Halloween. And we will be back then.
Happy Halloween. Bye.
Happy Halloween. Bye-bye. I just lost the button. Hang on. There we go.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.